Good afternoon. Thanks for joining Washington, D.C.-based Jennifer Schaus & Associates in our Get Farsighted in 2020 complimentary webinar series. As you know, the FAR Federal Acquisition Regulations is the rule book that the federal government must follow when making purchases. Our webinar series pulls from contracting experts to explain each part of the FAR. It's complimentary and recorded. We'll post all of the recordings on our website and YouTube channel where we have over 300 government contracting webinars available for download. A special thanks to our webinar partner in this series, the National Veteran Small Business Coalition Education Foundation. Please visit their website to learn more about the organization. We would also like to thank our friends at Open the FAR for their sponsorship. If your organization is interested in sponsoring the series or one part, please contact hello@jenniferschaus.com. And now a bit about us. We work with primarily large businesses to help them navigate the federal marketplace. We work with both product and service companies as well as software firms. Our clients span the globe and include publicly traded organizations in a variety of sectors. We provide market analysis reports, contract administration, contract vehicle assistance, and more. All of our services can also be built into a training program for your team. Learn more about us on our website. And now we would like to let you know about some ways to reach government and government contractors through us. We offer advertising and sponsorship opportunities through our weekly newsletter and also in our webinar series. For pricing or to place an order, please email us at hello@jenniferschaus.com. Additionally, please join us for our signature event on April 20th at the Kennedy Center. U.S. State Department will be available to meet with you, and we expect 150 federal contractors to attend, and we really hope to see you there. And now let's move on to learn a bit about today's speaker, Anna Urban. You can find her contact information on the screen here. Today we're covering FAR Part 10 with Anna. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really thankful for your participation in the series. The floor is now yours.
Thanks, Arnav. The lag is a bit longer than expected, so it's still on the advertise with us slide. So I'm going to start talking, but we'll see how it catches up. So if you could go to the first slide, and let's just hope that other folks see it. First, what is market research? It is, first of all, it's a continuous process for gathering information about not only the product characteristics, the parts and the service itself, but also about the suppliers that provide them, as well as the business practices used in the commercial sector. For example, terms and conditions, discounts, any volume pricing, any buyer financing, anything about the environment in which these products or services are used and sold in the private and government sector. Plus, the second part of market research, once you gather that data, is to analyze it in order to make the best acquisition decision. There are two kinds of market research. One is the market investigation, which is specific, one-time research pertaining to a particular requirement, and the market surveillance or intelligence, which is ongoing market research, just keeping an eye on things. For example, if you were shopping for a car in 2 years, you're not going around to dealerships now, but you may be paying attention to some trends or some innovative features, or maybe asking folks that own particular makes and models of cars just to have a good idea, so that when time does come to buy it, you are honing in more specifically on the things you want to know and on the things you need to get more specific information on. Next slide, please. So the screen is a little bit behind. It says about our speaker now, but I think everybody will have access to the slides eventually. So let me just talk about quickly about review. Why do federal agencies have to perform market research? And for those of you that have been following along with the series, in FAR Part 7, you covered acquisition planning. There are 3 sections in FAR Part 7 that specifically refer to market research. One is requiring MR for all acquisitions. That's FAR 7.102. FAR 7.105 requires acquisition plans to address the impact of market research, and then FAR 7.107 requires market research specifically in justifying bundling. Just a quick aside, bundling means a particular type of consolidation. So consolidation of contracts is pulling individual smaller contracts into one bigger one. Bundling refers to the types of consolidation that makes those particular procurements that are consolidated unavailable for small business or unattainable or much more difficult for small business to compete for them. So bundling requires specific caution because you're talking about taking opportunities out of small business competition realm, and we want to be conscious of that at all times. Next slide, please. When does market research need to be conducted? Now, there is the ongoing market survey process that happens as underlying activity throughout the life cycle for acquisition. But specifically, market research must be done before developing a new requirements document. So before a contracting office or program office decides to go out and design an acquisition strategy around something. Before soliciting offers for procurement over the simplified acquisition threshold, which currently is $250,000. And if it makes sense to do research for procurement under the simplified acquisition threshold, if the cost is justified. You're not going to do market research if you're trying to buy 2 pens. It's just not worth the time to do it. And also when adequate information is not available about what it is that you're trying to buy. If an item is under $250,000, but you still don't know exactly what you need for the agency or to fulfill that particular requirement, you still want to perform market research even though it's under the SAS threshold. And obviously, as referenced in FAR 5.7, the market research needs to be conducted before solicitation that could lead to bundling, that could lead to taking contracts and opportunities away from something that small businesses could compete for. Next slide, please. The goal of market research, first, is to expand the use of commercial items, of products and services that are already on the market, so that the government doesn't need to create or cause a contractor to create something new, which is more timely and often more costly if solutions already exist to meet the government needs out in the marketplace. Another reason is to understand and incorporate commercial practices. There may be some best practices, there may be some products or services that have been used in other sectors in industry that are maybe better, more innovative, newer, more flexible than what government currently has. And to the extent possible, the goal is to incorporate that into government procurements as well. Identifying emerging technologies goes along with the second factor. What is out there that the government could use as well that is better than what's current. Talking to, as part of market research, then talking to emerging technology leaders, doing tests and all that will become a part of that strategy. As you're looking at emerging technologies, you also need to address obsolescence issues. So if there is a particular homegrown system that is ancient, or a product that is no longer being manufactured, something that will be either impossible or very expensive for government to procure, looking at market research to see what could replace that. For example, if you have an old printer and the toner keeps getting more and more expensive because nobody in the world uses that anymore, manufacturing small quantities of that toner is probably far more costly than even getting a whole new machine altogether. Expanding use of non-developmental items, so non-R&D, of things that are commercially available, things that could be easily adapted to government use, is almost as important as utilizing commercial items. So something in industry, in the market that may be available, that's not quite right for government, but almost the same. It's much more preferable to customize for government of an item that exists in the marketplace than to create something new out of thin air. As all this market research is conducted, it is used to develop the acquisition strategy, to tailor contract terms and conditions to promote best value. You're looking at prices. You're looking at availability in the market. You're looking at delivery terms. So you understand the market, you understand the providers, and as part of that, you are identifying small business opportunities that it could be set aside for either a small business or socioeconomic categories of small businesses, like women-owned, hub-zone, service-disabled, veteran-owned businesses, and socially and economically disadvantaged businesses. Next slide, please. The process of market research. First is the program and contracting office have to describe the need in terms sufficient to allow conduct of market research. So figure out what is it that is needed. Is as specifically as possible so that when market research is being conducted, you know what it is that you're looking for. You know the specifications that it has to meet. You know what questions you need to ask in order to formulate those specifications further. The second step is utilizing market research to determine if there are commercial or commercial non-developmental items, which are items that could be easily customized for government, if such are available. Then you're looking to see if market research indicates if such items are not available. Do we need to look at our requirements? Do we need to look at what is needed? Figure out whether, yes, the product or the service that is necessary to fulfill this mission, to fulfill this objective, absolutely requires creation of something new, or if that need could be restated or reconfigured in such a way that commercial or non-developed items can be used to increase the speed, the efficiency, and decrease the cost of providing that product or service to government. If commercial items or non-developmental items are available to meet the need, then the Federal Acquisition Regulation provides for contract terms under FAR Part 12 that make it easier for government to buy it using commercial practices. And you'll cover that in a couple of weeks in the FAR Part 12 chapter. And as that market research is being conducted, it is important to document those market research results in a manner appropriate to the size and complexity of the acquisition. So there are several ways that market research report will be used. First of all, if there is another need in the near future, those reports are useful within 12 to 18 months for buying similar things. For example, another office might have a similar requirement. Another agency may ask for best practices. I see you implemented this software package, for example. Could you share what you found out? Also, when the OSDBU Office of Small Disadvantaged Business Utilization, or on the DoD side, the OSBP, Office of Small Business Programs, when they're reviewing market research to ensure that the contracting office complied with the rule of two under FAR 19 to make sure that small businesses were considered to the extent practicable. The market research will help, documentation will help determine whether or not sufficient efforts were put forth to ensure that small business resources were considered and a set aside was applied if that is at all possible. Next slide, please. How is market research done? It is many of the ways that you're familiar with already. Some of them are not rocket science at all. It's similar things you would do even in your personal life to buy major products or services. Talking to government and industry experts about the capabilities. Looking at results of recent market research that was done to meet similar or identical requirements. Publishing formal RFIs or sometimes sources sought notices to request industry to provide input. Now, let me take a quick little detour. So, under the FAR, sources sought notice and RFI requests for information are different. They're seeking different things. Sources sought notice is supposed to be an inquiry, a market research inquiry to identify potential sources. It is most often done to to identify any small or socioeconomic businesses that are out in the market available to meet that need. An RFI, or request for information, is a more technical inquiry. It is a request for industry to provide answers to particular questions, to comment on or provide solutions to address a particular technical requirement. For example, if I had a completely dark room, an RFI for how do we make this room not so dark would be soliciting all kinds of answers, whether they may be, we need to put in candles, we need to wire it for electrical light, or we need to blast a hole in one of the walls so that you have outside, sunlight comes in. That's the RFI. However, what you see quite often is that RFIs and sources sought notices are used interchangeably, like the term means the same thing, even though we all know it doesn't. And now we're all FAR experts, so we know it does not. Look at sources sought and RFI notices and actually read them so that you have a good understanding of what is required to be responsive for that particular request for government. And any opportunity you have to submit an answer to a government entity that starts a conversation, that puts you and your solution and your company in front of your potential buyers, in my mind, is a good use of your resources. So that's the RFI soapbox. Another market research technique is to look at government-wide databases that are available of available sources of companies, of small business databases. For example, if an agency is looking for architecture and engineering service and they want to see if there are any hub zone companies that provide architecture and engineering service, they could go into the SBA's DSBS, or Dynamic Small Business Search, and search for hub zone and a particular NAICS code or a particular keyword and identify that. There's the contractor directory. You could look at SAM. You could look at past awards, such as with FPDS or USA Spending, to identify what companies have provided similar services or products to other agencies in the past, what NAICS codes they were used. So a lot of published information can be repurposed for market research purposes, even if some of that were technically not created for that purpose. And industry, I recommend you utilizing those as well. Another market research technique that may not appear as it on its face is participating in interactive communication. That doesn't happen as often, but we do see more and more. And frankly, maybe with the health scare and folks being cautioned to be in large crowds, perhaps online communications will be more common. But you do see virtual conferences, virtual industry days popping up more and more, and that is a great way to utilize efficiencies and save everybody time and travel and traffic headaches. Asking other contracting agencies and activities for their market research, for their documentation, for their best practices of what has been done is also a quick way to streamline market research, especially if the need is very similar and that previous acquisition that you're referring to is pretty recent. 18 months at most, best practices 12 months is how old market research is in industry before it becomes unusable, because especially in small business, there are companies coming up with new capabilities, new companies being formed all the time, and you want to be inclusive of those requirements and of those small business opportunities. Looking at sources published by vendors and by industry groups, and product literature that you may collect at conferences, capability sheets, product specifications, those are all valid, solid market research guidance that could help you narrow down your requirements as well as tell you more about particular vendor capabilities. And then conducting meetings, whether it's one-to-many, such as industry day briefings or procurement conferences, or having one-on-one vendor briefings and interviews in the office, or if they want to demo something, it could be on site, at a contractor site. Those are additional good ways of identifying potential offers, including them, and a good way to attract non-traditional contractors as well, and get them to give them an opportunity to be involved in the procurement process. Next, please. So with the vast amounts of market research that are being collected through all these means, and it doesn't mean that a contracting office has to use all the items that we talked about earlier. If it's something that using one or two of those techniques can be sufficient to determine what needs to be bought, what is the IGCE, the government cost estimate, what are the timelines, and what are the requirements, and everything necessary to put a good procurement together and acquisition strategy based on that, then that's all that's necessary. There's no requirement that a contracting officer has to perform an exhaustive search of all the available resources, because it's diminishing returns if no additional information is necessary. So what are the market research results used for? Well, determining if there are sources capable of satisfying the requirement. For example, can a particular requirement be set aside for hub zone companies? If not, maybe for another set aside. If not, maybe for small business. If not, maybe for full and open, unrestricted competition. Or maybe there are no providers available, or maybe there's only one company that does it, and you're then at the mercy of their schedule, terms and condition, and pricing. And perhaps at that point, reconfiguring your requirements so that it is something else, so that it's not controlled by a monopolistic source, maybe in the benefit of the government. If market research determines that commercial items are available or non-developmental items are available, then that's good news all around. It's a faster procurement. It's FAR Part 12 competition that could be streamlined for commercial sources. If commercial items are not available to meet the requirements completely, 100%, perhaps market research could identify that some commercial items could be incorporated at the component level. So perhaps a particular product or solution has to be customized or has to be created for government in particular, but a component of it, a subpart, something could be acquired commercially, again, saving time and money and diversifying the pool of potential vendors that could provide that particular product or that service. Also, as you're doing market research, perhaps for something specific, you get to have a sense of what is that industry, what is that marketplace like? What are the common maintenance or warranty agreements? Is there, do particular services, are they billed hourly? Or maybe if it's a training requirement, are those bought per student or per classroom? Are they done on-site, off-prem? Are they concentrated in a particular geographic area? What kind of packaging exists if it's a product? How do those things come shipped? How are they displayed? What kind of marketing happens? So that you get a really good idea of not just the product or service, but all of the conditions and all of the landscape and the environment that those products or those services are delivered in. You could also use the market research to determine what are some other government goals that could be met while performing this requirement or while soliciting this requirement. For example, use of recovered materials, green initiative, and maybe buying something local to a particular service area. And obviously, as I mentioned before, if something could be procured using small or socioeconomic set-asides, then that's valuable, at least from the perspective of the OSDBU and from the industry. Next slide, please. So what happens if a market research determines that commercial items are not available? Well, step one is to reevaluate the need and determine whether you could change the requirements in such a way that you could buy something using commercial item practices. Perhaps it's reviewing the requirement, perhaps it's breaking up a larger requirement to see if portions of it could be subject to a commercial procurement, even if the whole thing cannot be. Or if truly Based on solid market research, the agency determines that this needs to be a government-specific requirement to create a new product or a new service specific to meet the needs here. If the procurement can be met by the commercial marketplace, then you solicit and award using FAR Part 12, and there are other FAR parts that you'll learn about in subsequent weeks that deal with different kinds of procurement, like simplified acquisitions, sealed bidding, and negotiation. And at the conclusion of the market research and at the conclusion of the actual solicitation, documenting and completing that documentation of the market research results is important to help your particular agency procure the same item again, justify that requirement, talk to industry. That could be useful in debriefing as well, and also also to assist other government or commercial entities as they are trying to perform similar acquisitions in the future. So that ends my portion of the presentation. I think you have my contact information. If you have any questions about market research in the federal environment, and I'll be happy to answer them and to speak further. You could find me on LinkedIn as well. Thank you.
Thanks for a great presentation, Anna, and to the audience members, we thank you again for participating with us. If you have any questions about this specific part, please contact our speaker with the contact information you see on the screen. And if you have any questions about federal contracting or need assistance with any of our services, please contact us directly. Thank you again for joining us. This concludes today's webinar.